No matter where you live, there's the possibility of experiencing some kind of bad weather. We lived in Maine for about 13 years, and since I was self-employed and could pretty much dictate my own schedule, I decided to work part-time for my town's EMS service. So I got trained in emergency response, and I was often called out when someone called 911 with a medical emergency or an injury. And usually I was working with a paramedic who was pretty much in charge of the situation because they were more experienced. I would do whatever was needed to assist them and the patient, and a lot of times that meant I was driving the ambulance to the hospital while they took care of the patient in the back. There's one call I remember pretty clearly. This was in the winter, at night, and we had just had a big snowstorm, so the driving conditions were pretty bad. We got a call about a car accident. This was just a single vehicle crash. The person had lost control and run into a tree. We got there and found just one person, the driver, and she was still in the car with some broken bones. Her worst injury was her broken pelvis. She had what's called an open book fracture, where the pelvis is broken into right and left halves. It's really painful, and she was conscious and experiencing all of it. We got her out of the car and into the ambulance, and I was not looking forward to this trip. It was still snowing pretty hard, and it was dark, so the visibility was poor, and the roads were slippery. And this is rural Maine, so the hospital was not close by. We had to get to the hospital down in Portland. In perfect weather, it was about a 30-minute drive. On this night, it took well over an hour. And that was some high-stress driving. I had to kind of creep along and make sure I stayed on the road and didn't slide off into the ditch. And there was the added pressure that this poor girl in the back was depending on my driving to get her to the emergency room. On top of that, she's lying on her back with a badly broken pelvis, and every time I hit a bump in the road, she would scream in pain, and I'd feel terrible because I hit that bump. We eventually got there, but that ride seemed to take forever. My guest today is Todd. He lives in Canada, and he has seen his share of bad winter weather. He's also a truck driver, so in a lot of cases, he finds himself driving his tractor-trailer in those conditions. Most of the time, it's no big deal. He's used to it. With poor visibility and slippery roads, everyone on the highway just keeps moving forward slowly and carefully, and eventually you get there. But there was one time he was driving during a bad snowstorm, and that slow forward movement came to a stop. And that's where he stayed. Real people in unreal situations.
There is a man standing in front of me in my bedroom.
My friend has been shot.
I'm literally inside the river, and I'm inside my car.
He had told me multiple times that he was going to set himself on fire.
If you say my name or try to look at me, I'm gonna kill you.
And he was just sobbing. He said, Mom, tell me you're gonna be okay.
And I jumped on the hood of the car and I held on.
And I looked into the garage and he was hanging from the rafters.
I had somebody standing on my neck.
He's better to me dead. I want him dead.
I'm Scott Johnson, and this is What Was That Like? When this happened, you were fairly new to driving a truck. What attracted you to that kind of work?
Kind of fell into it, actually. In high school, I took the trades and everything, and electrical and machine shop and automotive, and I just got a job out of high school at a factory that my dad worked at, and it was paid good, so I kind of stayed there for 15 years, and I lost my job when they decided to relocate, and I didn't want to, and like I said, it was kind of like a backup plan, I guess, and fell into it.
There seems to be there's some kind of an attraction about having a job where you get to be by yourself and you're just on the road. What do you like about that?
The freedom I guess I mean, it gets frustrating at times with the way people drive and everything. But just like my company's pretty good too. Like they tell you where you're going, and they don't ask you why it took so long to get there or why you went a certain way there. So it's pretty good. You're kind of your own boss, I guess, in a sense.
Are there any special skills involved in driving a truck on the highway as opposed to city driving? It seems like highway might even be a little easier since you just put it in gear and just go.
Yeah, in a way, yeah. The city is definitely more challenging to navigate around streets and cars and stuff. But I mean, the highway eventually you still have to get off and go to a customer. So, but yeah, it's probably much more difficult in the city all the time.
And at this time, you were fairly new to driving a truck. How long had you been driving?
I got my license in 2008, but I didn't really utilize it too much until 2009, and that was just like a kind of running trailers around the city. So it was January of 2010 is when I started on the highway, and this happened in December of 2010. So not even a year on the highway.
Yeah, less than a year. And was your truck one of those that set up with a bunk behind the cab so you could overnight?
Yes, I had a bunk in the back, yeah.
And what kind of facilities do you have in that? I mean, there's a bed, obviously. What else do you have back there?
Yeah, there's a bed, and then there's heater controls that are attached, like as they would be in the front, like a fan control and a temperature control. And then there's also, in that truck, had a separate bunk heater, which is tied into the diesel fuel. And it's a separate heater, so you don't have to have the truck running to get heat. Other than that, it's just cupboards and storage in a TV, thankfully.
Like, it sounds like a little a micro-size apartment.
Yes, it is. Yeah, and actually, the truck I have now, it's a lot nicer set up and bigger space and everything.
All right. Well, let's talk about this trip. You live in Canada.
Yes.
In Ontario. So you started this trip in Brantford, Ontario, Canada. And where were you headed?
I was headed to Port Huron, Michigan, which is it should have been about a 2.5 to 3 hour drive total.
And the distance is, I think, like you said, around 130 miles, which would be 210 kilometers?
Probably around there, yeah.
All right. And what were you hauling?
I was hauling little cardboard tubes. So it'd be the tubes that you see inside of like your duct tape or your painter's tape or Scotch tape. They come in certain lengths or cut up short. And so just not much weight whatsoever.
Yeah. So a fairly light load then.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
This trip involved 3 main highways.
Yes.
Take us through what time. This was on a Monday. What time did you start driving?
I can't remember exactly what time I left, but I believe it was probably around 4 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, so you get started real early then.
Yeah, that customer at that time wanted us there early in the morning. It had snowed overnight, which was nothing unusual, I guess, for the wintertime. And as I got on the 403, I started noticing that the plows had gone through in one lane, but it was just that type of snow that once the plow goes through or once the cars drive on it, it turns to almost like a sheet ice on top of the snow. So that was pretty hectic, I guess, to navigate through that. I just took my time, and that was the conditions for that stretch. It was probably about a half an hour normal drive on that road.
Did you ever consider not making that trip because of the driving conditions?
I definitely did when I got on the highway, but the problem is there's not really any very good place to turn around. So like a lot of the on ramps off ramps you can't get off and turn around and go back the other way. And I just I kind of crossed my mind, I guess, but I just started trekking along. So as I hit the 401, which was in Woodstock, Ontario, the icy conditions were gone, but the wind had picked up, and there was much more snow on the highway still. The plows had gone through, but they couldn't keep up with the amount of snow that was coming, plus the drifting. So as I navigated down there, it was pretty much just the middle lane was clear. The right lane was kind of iffy, and then the left lane, the problem with that one was the plows had gone through, but then at certain points they stopped plowing, so people would go out to pass, and then they'd be mid pass, and all of a sudden there'd be like a big pile of snow, like not a pile of snow, but the unplowed road in front of them. So it was I think twice along that stretch, cars actually slid sideways beside me, and I thought they were going to come into me, but they luckily saved it.
I know people who live in cold climates are kind of used to driving in snowy weather and bad conditions. Was there a lot of traffic on the highway?
That stretch on the 401, there seemed to be a lot more than usual. I don't know whether people had left early because of the storm or just people slowed down because of the storm. It kind of all got congested. But that is a pretty busy stretch along there too.
Finally, you got to the 3rd main highway. This is the 402.
As I got on there, it was pretty much just the right lane. It was just, you could see like the tire tracks of cars and everything else was snow. And just by the time we got to there, we were probably only doing like 40 to 50 kilometers an hour. And at the very start of it, there was, a couple of trucks and a couple of cars passed. But then after that, it was pretty much single file the whole way till probably about 70 kilometers. It was just like that, pretty much. The fast lane was, it was hard to tell what lane you're in at that point. But so there's pretty much only one clear lane of traffic. So people, like I said, at the start of it, a couple of people got brave and passed some people, but then it was just too dangerous to try to go out there. As we navigated down the 402, I said the start of it, we're doing about 50, 60 kilometers an hour. It wasn't too bad, and kind of got, I don't know, probably about halfway down, and it was starting to slow down a little bit. And we got to around the 35 kilometer mark, and we stopped. And there's trees on both sides of me, so I was kind of sheltered a little bit from the weather. And we were stopped there for maybe 5-10 minutes, and then we moved again a little bit and stopped again. And we were stopped for about a half an hour, and I'm thinking, going through my head, I'm thinking, is this it? Like, are we stranded now, or you don't know what's happening? And then finally it started moving again. I thought, okay, we're good to go now. We're going slow, and well, I got about another 5 kilometers, and it stopped again. And now this time I'm have an open field beside me, and the snow was just blowing across. They couldn't see the car in front of me when we were stopped half the time. Just kind of sat there for a while, and eventually I realized we weren't moving.
And with heavy wind, your truck is a big target. Was it kind of swaying, or how was it affected by the wind?
Yeah, it was getting rocked. I was never in fear of it tipping over, but it was rocking it back and forth pretty much the whole day and night, the first night.
In your truck, you've got a CB radio, right?
Yes.
What were you hearing? What other reports were you hearing from other people?
When I first got stopped, of course, everybody's asking, what's going on? And after a certain amount of time, we determined that the highway wasn't moving. So I could hear other truck drivers saying, "Oh, well, I'm on this road and we're still getting through," and then another one would be, "Oh, I'm on this road and I'm getting through," and eventually it was, it wasn't funny, but it was kind of comical to hear. Just one by one, every road got shut down because somebody getting stuck in the middle of the road or going in the ditch and blocking a lane. And just over the course of the day, everything got shut down.
And was that the actual reason for the eventual stop in traffic? Is because some car up ahead had spun out or got in a ditch and was blocking the road?
To tell you the truth, I'm not exactly sure why we even stopped. Like when I eventually got out, like I had to weave around a bunch of stopped cars, but I never saw anything blocking the entire road unless they'd cleared it out before I got there. But I think, honestly, just people got stuck in the middle of the road at some point in time. Maybe got drifted in and they couldn't go, and so I'm not exactly sure why we got stopped.
The outside temperature must have been pretty cold. How cold was it inside your truck? You got a heater.
Yeah, so the problem was I had troubles with the heat in my truck, the heat from the engine, and I hadn't had a chance to get it fixed. So it was pretty cold in the front of the truck, but I had my bunk heater cranked on, and it was the bunk heater. If I had it on like full blast, it would cook you out of the truck. Like it worked really well. And the first day I had it turned up more than normal just to keep warm, but the outside I think it was only about minus 10 degrees Celsius, but with the wind, I bet you it was minus 25, something like that.
Were you in communication with anyone? Like you must have like a dispatch operator or somebody who keeps track of where you are and things, right?
Yeah. So I when we stopped, I think the first time I called my dispatch just to let them know that probably originally I let them know that I was going to be late because of the weather, obviously, and then we got stopped, and I don't remember how long after we stopped that I let them know that we're stopped now, and I don't know when I'm going to get out of here or if I'm going to get out of here, and then my mom, obviously, I let her know what was going on.
What did she think of this?
She, at the first, she wasn't too worried about it, but she started watching the news and seeing how bad it was, and she definitely wanted me to get out of there.
I understand there was a car in front of you. Everybody stopped at this point, and there's a car in front of you, which is a VW Jetta.
Yes.
What did you observe about that car?
Well, when we first stopped, I think I sent you a couple of videos. It was blowing so hard you couldn't even see it at sometimes. And so I was sitting there, and I was spending some of the time in my bunk, so I just kind of got bored. I'd kind of peek out, and I started noticing snow drifts actually drifting up the side of the car, and So after a while, I looked out, and the snowdrift was actually almost to the roof of his car on the driver's side. So I thought, well, I may as well get out and see if they're okay. And so just as I got out and got bundled up, they were getting out of their car, and it was two businessmen in suits. And the driver crawled out the passenger side, so the three of us actually shoveled the snowdrift away so they wouldn't get buried.
Of course, now that you got the snow shoveled away, still can't go anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. It was and you can see the pictures I sent you too. The drifts were actually drifting around my truck as well, and it was just, after a while, it was impassable. Like, there's no way anything can get through except for a snowmobile. You at some point took some pictures and sent them to a local news channel. Yes. So I after a while of sitting there, I obviously got bored and stir crazy, so I got bundled up and I started walking around. And part of the reason I got out too is I was making sure some of the cars that were close to me had water and heat and everything. And so I started taking pictures, and the local news channel that I usually watch, I thought, well, I'll just send them pictures, because they actually had I forget what they called it now, but they used to advertise for listeners to send in pictures of the weather, like sunrises or whatever. So I'll just send. I had no intentions of anything. I just sent the pictures to say, hey, this is the pictures of what I'm going through. And it wasn't long after that they called, or they emailed me back and said, would you be interested in being on the news? So I said, all right, I guess so. And that was when we got stopped in the morning. It was about 9 something in the morning. So their first, I think they have an 11 o'clock news, but it was past that. So they asked me if I'd be on the 6 o'clock news. And then I was on at 11 o'clock that night, and then the morning show the next day. And it was kind of funny because another news channel contacted me because they had seen me on that network and asked me if it wasn't TV, it was just a radio show. And they asked me if I'd do a segment for them. As soon as I did that segment for that one, the first news channel never contacted me again.
The OPP is strongly advising people to stay off the roads. Highway 402 is closed near Sarnia because of extremely snowy conditions, and there are reports that wind gusts reach 90 kilometers an hour at times today. Now, the good news is the wind warning has ended for that area. The bad news, snow squall warnings continue. Right now, more than 500 drivers are stranded on the 402, and many have been there for more than 8 hours. Todd McDougall, who drives a truck for a living and is a regular viewer of the Evening News at 6, sent in these pictures to us today. They were taken on the 402. He also joins us right now live by phone. And Todd, I understand you're stuck on the highway. How long you've been stuck? How much longer do you think it's going to be?
I'm not too sure. It's been about 9 hours now, and I haven't heard any word whatsoever of any idea when we might be out of here. I would only assume now that we'll be here probably overnight.
So Todd, exactly what are you driving, and what have you been doing for these 9 hours then?
I drive the tractor trailer. Unfortunately, I don't have a whole lot of weight to help me when I was driving, but I've just been in the bunk here watching DVDs all day and listening to the chatter on the CV.
Unbelievable. Now, how are you able to stay warm, or can you keep warm? Do you have food? Do you have any supplies just in the event of something like this?
Yeah, luckily I've got a bunk heater in the truck, and I've had the truck running just to try to keep the windows defogged. And it's so windy and so cold, it's hard to keep enough temperature in the engine to actually heat the inside of the truck. As far as food and that, I usually have extra food and water, especially in the wintertime, just in case of something like this.
So it's good that you're prepared. These pictures, Todd, I mean, we're just watching them come through on the screen. These are unbelievable shots. It looks like in some cases you've been parked there for so long that the snow is just sort of building up and blowing up all around you. I mean, has anybody moved? Any other drivers having any better luck than you?
No, as far as I can see, like, the visibility isn't very good, but I haven't seen anybody. I've seen a couple cars the first couple hours, sneak past in the fast lane, but from what I'm hearing, they didn't get very far. And as far as the accumulation goes, there's a little Volkswagen Jetta in front of me there, and I actually got out there a while ago and helped him dig out the side of his car, so it was actually almost to the top of the driver's window. The drift was piled up there.
Yeah, we can kind of see that in a picture, actually, Todd, that we have up here now. We can see the Jetta you're talking about and how much snow is certainly built up there. Now, what about the police emergency crews? Have you seen them? Have you heard from them? What are their efforts like?
The only two, I heard quite a while ago that they were out on their snowmobiles and ATVs, and it wasn't until maybe 20 minutes ago I seen 2 snowmobiles go the other direction on, like, going, they went east on the westbound lanes, and I'm not sure where they went to, but they didn't stop here.
So has anybody been in touch with you to sort of let you know what's going on and what kind of efforts they're making?
No, I just, mind you, I haven't had the radio stations on, but from what I hear, the other truckers on the CB saying that, there's different stories here and there, but I'm not really hearing anything too promising.
So, Todd, do you have any sense at all as to when you might get out of there, or is it just a complete mystery to you?
Yeah, complete mystery. I've heard other guys saying, too, that the storm's supposed to last till Wednesday, so hopefully not that long. But like I said, I'm pretty sure I'll be here the night at least.
Yeah, certainly hope not. Okay, Todd, we're going to keep in touch throughout the evening, and we'll try to get an update from you at 11, though I hope at that time you're back home at least. But we'll check back with you. Thanks a lot, Todd.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
So here you are, you're in your truck all alone, but everybody nearby is hearing your voice.
Yeah.
Do you feel kind of like a celebrity a little bit?
Maybe for a couple minutes, I guess. Wasn't very long-lived, I guess.
You know, there was a time back in the day here in America where a big part of the population lived on farms. Nobody needed a reminder to eat vegetables and fruits in order to stay healthy. It was just part of everyday life. Then Americans became more mobile, and we needed foods that wouldn't spoil. So now we have fast food and processed food, and big surprise, we're a lot less healthy. Well, let me tell you what I do to keep myself in good health. I take Field of Greens. Field of Greens is an organic superfood, and it's packed with a full spectrum of vegetables and fruits, plus herbs and prebiotics that are actually backed by science. This is what you and I need to stay healthy. And it's easy. Just mix a scoop with water in the morning. I usually have either lemon lime or wild berry, and you're enjoying the effects throughout the day. You'll have more energy, you'll feel healthier. You might even notice that you're losing weight. And isn't it a nice little surprise when that happens? I've got an annual physical coming up in a few months, and I'm looking forward to having my doctor compare my old lab work with my new lab work and tell me that I'm crushing it in the health department. And you can join me in this by taking Field of Greens for yourself. I even got you 15% off your first order and another 10% off when you subscribe for recurring orders. Just visit fieldofgreens.com and use the promo code WHAT. It's time to get back to feeling healthy and being healthy. Go to fieldofgreens.com and use the promo code WHAT and get 15% off your first order. And thanks to Field of Greens for sponsoring this podcast.
I was lucky I had just a small TV in my truck with not a portable DVD player, but a small DVD player, and I just bought the DVD set for Seinfeld, so I pretty much between watching outside and seeing the snow and watching Seinfeld, I kind of managed my time that way.
You're sitting there doing nothing, and so you watch a show about nothing.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah. Were you concerned about running out of fuel?
No, I had. For some reason, I don't know why, but I'd gotten the idea of in the wintertime, I always kept it above half a tank, just in case something did happen. So thankfully, it was not a concern of mine. Some of the trucks on the CB, I could hear them when we first got stopped, and a couple of guys were on there saying, "Oh, I've only got a quarter tank of fuel. Like, what am I going to do?" And somebody else saying, "I've got an eighth of a tank of fuel. I'm going to run out." And I'm thinking, I just don't know why they wouldn't think to not put themselves in that situation.
Yeah, and you're the rookie driver. And you're better prepared than these other veteran drivers.
Yeah, it was said by pure luck. And actually, just I don't know, probably a month prior, I had decided I better stock up my truck with water and canned food in case something happened. So I was all set for food and everything. I could have stayed there for a week.
You were ready.
Mm-hmm.
What about when you had to use the bathroom? Does your truck have like a little toilet in it or anything?
No, it doesn't. Some of the bigger ones, like the big ones, do, but most of them don't. So I got lucky as far as the BM goes, but anything else, I just I had to go outside and between you can hide between the truck and the trailer, so nobody can see you. But the cars, I'm not sure what they were doing.
Yeah, they were in a pretty tough spot there.
It would have been a long night and sitting in a little car.
At what point did you realize I'm going to be here for the night?
It was probably around the time the news channel, or maybe I think in the news channel they actually asked me if I had any idea when I was going to get out of there, and I think at that point it was 9 hours, and I think it was around then. I think I said to him, just at this point I can only assume we're going to be here for the night at least, and I assumed that the morning would come and everything would clear up and we'd be out of there. But it was probably later on that day.
Were you okay with sleeping overnight, or was it warm enough in the truck?
It was at first. I definitely slept in the truck many times before, but so I went to bed and I had just regular bed sheets and I went to sleep, and the wind was rocking the truck so bad, and I woke up, I don't know, partway through the night, and I was cold and I couldn't figure out why. And I have a little alarm clock in my truck that has the temperature on it. It had gotten down to 4 degrees Celsius inside the truck because the front heat wasn't working good enough, and then the bunk heater wasn't turned up enough. So I had a thermal sleeping bag, so I ended up getting that, and I put all my clothes back on, put my toque on, and got in the sleeping bag and slept that way.
4 degrees Celsius, that's like 39 Fahrenheit, so that's just barely above freezing, and that's inside your truck.
Inside my truck, yeah. So the second day I woke up, and I think I sent you those pictures too. I opened up my curtains and I actually had snow inside the truck because the heat in the front wasn't working good enough to melt the snow, and it was blowing so hard it was blowing inside the truck.
How was it getting in?
I'm not sure if it must have been coming through the vents, I guess, the fresh air vents. But and then part of it must have been frost, because the passenger side window was completely frosted over on the inside, like to the point where it looked like snow. When I woke up Tuesday, I opened the curtains and it still wasn't letting up. Like the weather was just relentless. It was still snowing pretty much just as hard as it was the first day. I opened up, looked outside, and at first there was nothing happening. Like there's just cars stopped everywhere. And a certain part through the day, we started seeing, the neighbors would hear, find out what was going on, and heard on the news that everything was shut down. And so they got on their snowmobiles and started coming around and checking on everybody. And
I'm thinking about everyone in their cars. It seems like the cars would run out of gas and people would just freeze to death with it being that cold. Was there any possibility of walking to somewhere, or was the snow just too deep? It wasn't able to get through.
A little bit of that, and the fact that the visibility was so terrible. Like there was a bridge, I think maybe an eighth of a mile in front of me the whole time, and I didn't know that bridge was there till like partway through the second day. Like it was snowing and blowing that hard.
You started hearing snowmobiles coming. Who were those people?
Some of the neighbors and stuff. The only house I could see was like a farmhouse on the other side of a field that was a ways away, but I'm assuming people seen the news and realized what was going on. So it was actually very nice. The people, like I heard from other people that they brought sandwiches and water, and so the whole day was the locals buzzing up and down with the snowmobiles. And then I forget at what point in time in that day that the OPP started showing up, and they started maybe midday. They started deciding they were going to evacuate people off the highway.
You talked to some of the people on snowmobiles, and they offered you a ride out, right?
Yes, when I was out taking pictures the one time, a couple of them come by and they stopped and asked me if I wanted to get out of there. And at that time there was people in cars and they didn't have any supplies and heat like I did, so I just told them, I'm good for a while. Like worry about the people in the cars first, because they have less room and they don't have food. And so I thankfully declined their offer.
Yeah, if you're in a VW Jetta, you don't have a bunk in the back with a heater to spend the night. Yeah,
not too comfortable.
Right. Then you saw that the policemen were starting to show up, and they were on snowmobiles, right?
Yes, so they were running back and forth beside me, like up and down the highway, getting people off. And I heard, I think the one picture I sent you of the helicopter, they had helicopters on, because the funny thing was too, the other side of the highway, there seemed to be hardly any cars stuck over there. So I don't know whether there was just less traffic or just the spot I was in, there was no cars. But from what I heard, the helicopter was landing over there and taking people to churches and libraries and stuff like that to get them off the highway.
Just evacuating, yeah.
Yeah. So of course I'm talking to Mom, and Mom's watching the news, and she's like, "Oh, they're planning on having everybody off the highway by the end of the day, so you should be safe by the end of the day." And I thought, okay. And so I said the whole day was just like, it was like a buzz of bees, just snowmobiles running back and forth. And so I was out. I think it was in the evening. It was close to, not dark, but it was getting that close to that. And I was out taking pictures, and a couple of OPP snowmobiles come up, and they both had 2 seats on both the snowmobiles. And they stopped and they asked me, like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm just out taking pictures and whatnot." And he says, "We're evacuating everybody off the highway." I said, "Okay." He says, like, you have to leave. Like, you can't stay here tonight. We're getting everybody off. And he said that there's 2 more OPPs. The OPP is the Ontario Provincial Police. He said there's 2 more OPPs coming behind us about half an hour. We'll tell them to stop and get you. Just get in your truck, turn your lights on, so they know which truck you're in, and they'll get you. I said okay. So I got in my truck and I sat there at least an hour and a half, and it was getting so cold because I was sitting in the front where the heat wasn't working. It was getting so cold. I thought, okay, you know what? I got to go warm up in the bunk. So I went and laid in the bunk, and like literally 2 to 3 minutes after I got back there, I heard the snowmobiles coming. And by the time I got out of bed and in the front to try to flash my lights or whatever, they were gone. So they I don't know if they didn't get radioed to pick me up, or if they didn't see the truck, or I'm not sure why they didn't saw it. And like I said, Mom was watching the news, and she's telling me, oh, everybody's going to be evacuated. And so I told her what happened there, and she's getting pretty worried. She definitely didn't want me on that highway the second night. And
maybe you should have just told your mom, hey, I'm at a farmhouse. These people are taking great care of me. You got nothing to worry about.
Yeah, I probably could have. Yeah, made it took the worry off of her a little bit.
So she was hearing reports. I mean, the police were saying, yep, everybody's evacuated, everybody's off the highway, but she knew differently.
Yep. So she had texted me or called me or something. I guess back then we probably called more than texted. And she said that, the news is saying everybody's off the highway. Like, they don't even know you're there. What if something happens? Like, you're out there all by yourself. And I was like, Mom, just relax. I've got food. I got water. I got heat. I'm fine. Like, I'll be okay. And she said, well, so finally I put her mind at ease enough. She said, but make sure you call first thing in the morning and tell them to come get you. So that was my agreement. Was I told her that I'd call first thing in the morning. And to the best of my knowledge, I was the only person on that highway for the second night.
Yeah, that had to be kind of a weird feeling. I mean, the first night, you're like one of many, and you're all going through the same thing together, even though you were better prepared than most of them. But that second night, you're all alone. Was that kind of creepy?
It was. I wouldn't say creepy, but it was definitely weird. After dark, sometime I kind of got the urge to go outside and just walk around, just to kind of absorb it more. And I thought, you know what, it's cold out there, and if something happens, then I'm definitely screwed. So I just decided to stay hunkered down again. When I got up Wednesday, it was definitely a lot clearer. It was sunny out, and I think it was still snowing or blowing a little bit. But so I got up in the morning, and like I promised my mom, I called the OPP and told them that I had gotten missed the night before and roughly where I was. And so they said, okay, well, it'll be a while, but we'll send somebody out to get you. I said, okay. So I can't remember from that phone call how long of time it was, but I started noticing, I had cars all around me. I couldn't see that well, but I started noticing something up ahead. So I got out and looked, and it was a bunch of farm tractors with giant snowblowers. They were working their way down the highway, like weaving in between all the abandoned cars and clearing out the sides of the roads and in between them all. So I kind of, I had nothing else to do, so I thought I'd sit there and watch them. And so they slowly made their way back, and they got close to me, and I was kind of wondering, what was going to happen when they got to me. And so he kind of got back, and he did a double take, and he looked over and saw me. So he pulled up beside me. He says, I forget exactly what he said at first, asked me if I was okay or whatever. And he says, once we clear out around you, or he asked me if I was stuck. That's what he said. He said, are you stuck? I said, no, I don't think so. He said, well, once we clear the snow around you, he says you can go. And I'm thinking to myself, well, where am I going? Like, I didn't realize I could get through up ahead. So I asked him, I said, well, go where? He says, well, go wherever you're going. I said, oh. So are you sure? He said, yeah. He says, I said, okay. He says, there's probably cops all around. He says, if anybody ever stops and asks you what you're doing, just let them know that I told you, to make it easier for us to clear it away, that I told you to go. Just take your time. So it was Wednesday. It was almost exactly 48 hours from the time I got stopped when I started rolling again.
Weren't you surrounded by other vehicles, though? How did you get your big truck weaving in between them?
Right where we stopped, there was actually one of the trucks that passed me when we first got on the 402. He was in the ditch beside me. That you can see that red truck that was in the ditch, the transport truck. So I think because he was in the ditch, no cars come up beside me. And again, it was pretty much all single file anyway. So I was able to, once the snowplows cleared the shoulders, and because I think where we were stopped, we were kind of in the middle of both lanes. So the snowplows were able to clear on both sides, like, of all the vehicles in front of me. So I had to weave. I had to kind of pick the best route and see which way I had the most room, but I made it through.
And now I want to tell you about a new sponsor, Uncommon Goods. It's kind of crazy. We're barely in November, and if you look around, we're already in full swing for holiday season. And that means it's time to start thinking about shopping for gifts for your family members and friends. You know how some people are just really good at finding great gifts? I guess you could say they're gifted at gifting. We all have at least one friend like that. And you know when they get you something, it's not going to be bland or boring. Well, now you have a secret weapon that's going to make you that person. Uncommon Goods finds really cool things from all over the world, and it's where you can find the most remarkable and unique gifts for everyone on your list. I recently treated myself to one of their finds. It's called a Rainbow Pentamino Puzzle. I love brain teaser things, and this one is multicolored in a birch wood frame. It's really beautiful. When you shop at Uncommon Goods, you can feel good about your purchases because you're supporting artists and small independent businesses. The items you'll see are high quality, and most of the time they're handmade. And every category is covered: art, jewelry, kitchen, home, and lots more. They really do have something for everyone. So don't go to the grocery store and do your Christmas shopping from the rack of boring gift cards. Go check out what Uncommon Goods has and make this holiday season memorable. And you can get 15% off the next gift you buy. Just go to uncommongoods.com/what. This is a limited time offer at uncommongoods.com/what to get 15% off. Uncommon Goods. We're all out of the ordinary. And thanks to Uncommon Goods for sponsoring this podcast.
I got, I don't know, probably about 5 or 6 kilometers past where I was, and you know, of course, I'm going slow because I had to go around all the cars, and I could see 2 OPP officers. I'm not exactly sure what they were doing, but they were up underneath of a bridge, and you know, as soon as they heard the engine, like they probably thought I was a snowplow at first, or a snowblower. As soon as they realized it wasn't, they did a double take, and as soon as they saw that, they come walking down that hill like with authority, almost like getting ready to not slap the cuffs on me, but that's kind of the way I felt.
Mm-hmm. Like, what are you doing here, right?
It's exactly. How, you know, where'd you come from, and what are you doing? And so I don't know if they thought I was stealing the truck or what, but so he come over and asked me, you know, what are you doing, or where are you coming from? And so I told him the story about the snowblower, and he said, all right. He's, you know, kind of hesitant about it, but he says, you know, he says, you made it this far, just take your time, and you know, there's cars all over the place up there, just take your time and weave your way through. And I said, okay, so I carried on my way.
Obviously, since you're going from Canada, you're going into Michigan, you've got to go through customs.
Yes.
What was involved with that?
Before customs, I got to there's a toll booth where you have to pay to cross the bridge, and I remember rolling up to there thinking, you know, this guy hasn't seen anybody for a couple of days, and and the other thing was I wasn't even sure if anybody would be there because, you know, there's no traffic, so why would they even be there?
Right.
So I pulled up to the toll booth, and the guy was looking at me pretty funny, but he never said a word, took my money, and away I went. So the customs, anybody that's never crossed the border, they're very, some of them are very professional. Some of them are just, you know, as they should be professional because you know, it's an important job. But some of them are just like your buddy type of thing on the street. They, you know, they joke around, and they talk to you like you're normal or whatever. But some of them are very, very serious. They're right to the point, and they don't joke around. They don't ask anything other than business. And that border especially, I've heard it's a training border, so they're even more that way. So I didn't know what to expect when I pulled up to the customs booth, and so I rolled up there and rolled my window down and shut the truck off. And he opens the window and he says exactly to me. He says, "Where the fuck did you come from?" And that just threw me because, like I said, they never joke around, they never swear, and so I explained him the story, and he said, you know, you've been stuck there for 2 days. I said, yeah, I was on the highway for 2 full days, and he asked me a couple other questions, and he basically said, well, he says, it looks like you've been through enough, so you're on your way. So I left, and I finally made it to the customer 2 days late.
Yeah, it's ironic. You mentioned the customer wanted you there early that first day, and you end up being 2 days late. What was their reaction?
You don't actually see anybody at that customer. It's just we'd drop the trailer in the door and take the other one out. So I'm sure when I called dispatch on the first day, they were notified of what was going on. Plus was pretty snowy there too. So
I'd say you had a pretty good excuse.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, didn't have much choice.
So now you had to turn around and go back, but wasn't the highway kind of still clogged with cars?
Yeah, so I got to the customer, and I can't remember who told me, but I wasn't even thinking. They said that the 402 is not open still, and I was like, oh yeah, just not even thinking about that. My focus was getting off the highway, and so I end up there's a truck stop in Marysville, Michigan, and I had to sit there for 3 hours before the highway was open. I could cross and go back.
So 3 more hours with nothing to do.
Yep, and I guess at that point I was used to it. But so then I got across, and in the 402, like I'm actually shocked that they even opened it that early. Like it was that icy conditions that I had in the 403. In the and there's a lot of curves around Sarnia, and I remember, I was taking my time. I'm thinking, man, it wouldn't take much for somebody to slide out and go in the ditch on this road. And like I said, I was surprised that it was open, but I wasn't stopping.
It seems like it would just take forever to get the highway open again because all the abandoned cars. I mean, all these cars are sitting here. The drivers, the owners of the cars are nowhere to be seen. They're safe somewhere now. And I'm sure they're thinking, wow, when can I go back and get my car? But it just seems like such a huge project.
Yeah, it would have been, the towing companies would have been definitely busy. And in that part of it, I'm actually glad that I didn't get evacuated because I think it would have been a very frustrating and situation because the other thing is what I heard, the people didn't know where their cars were. They took the driver to the church somewhere, and their cars were wherever, and so I heard it was kind of a nightmare trying to get back to their vehicles.
Were their cars mostly still on the highway, or did the cars get towed?
By the time I got back, they were definitely cleaning them off. There was still a bunch still on the highway, but when I was going back, and that's the weird part, like I said earlier, going eastbound, there wasn't. So I don't know whether they started on that side first or what it was, but I don't remember. Like I didn't have to weave around any cars going all the way home.
Mm-hmm.
There was cars and trucks in the ditch still, but not on the road.
Mom must have been pretty glad to see you.
Yep, she was pretty happy when I got off that road for sure.
This happened back in 2010.
Yes.
Have you seen anything like this happen again since then?
I've been through a couple of storms, probably just as bad. There was another one. Probably 2012, I was going to Holland, Michigan. That one, I was behind a car, or SUV, I guess it was, and we couldn't see the road, like we couldn't see nothing, and just taking our time. And I remember seeing something with the taillights was kind of funny, and I thought, what are they doing? And I realized, oh, that guy just went in the ditch, and I didn't know it. So I thought, okay, I guess I better not follow him anymore. And I was literally driving down the road, and I'd hit the rumble strips, and I'd have to look out my side window to see kind of which side of the road I was on to see which way to go. And actually, that trip there too, I finally made it to Michigan, and my headlights were probably like the size of a toonie each. It was all that was showing, and I got there, and it was automotive stuff, and you had to call into the dispatch whenever you got there. And so I called in, and this is another funny one. It was a woman that I'd never heard swear before, and so I called in, and I said to her, I said, "Yeah, it's Todd, and I made it." I made it, I think I said. And she says, "You made it where?" And I said, "I made it to Holland." She goes, "How the fuck did you make it there?" She said, "Everybody else is in the ditch." So I've definitely driven through a couple of other storms that were just as bad, but didn't get stopped, thankfully.
If there's any way of getting through a storm, it sounds like you find a way.
Yep, usually. And it's kind of funny too. I can't remember if it was later that week in 2010 or the next week. I was going the same direction, and I was kind of noticing the same conditions. And I stopped in London. There's an actual truck stop, and I parked. And my dispatcher at the time he didn't know how to take him. He, sometimes he'd call him and he'd be like, no problem. And other times he'd be, why would you do that type of thing? And so I called him and I said, I'm parking at the truck stop because it's snowing pretty good. And he had some things to say. And I told him, I said, you know what? I said, I spent 2 days stranded on the highway. If I'm going to get stranded in the storm again, I'm going to be at a truck stop. So he said, okay. I sat there for, I don't know, a couple hours, and it cleared up that time. So I went on my way.
So you already carried extra supplies, but going through this, did it change any of your practices, any of your driving routines?
Maybe I'll be quicker to pull over, I guess, if I am in that. Of course, just telling you the story I just told you, I guess it's not really true, but But now, like the company I'm with now, they really push. If you're not comfortable, or if the equipment in your life is more important than trying to get a load there. So now, maybe not right away, but now, I would stop a lot sooner now than I would have back then, probably.
Yeah, driver safety has to be the priority.
Yes, yeah, and it's very stressful and tiring driving through that stuff. So I'm getting too old for that.
I would think sometimes when you're driving and you see the conditions start to deteriorate, does it kind of go through your mind, here we go again?
It definitely does, yeah. I've been in a couple situations where it goes through my mind, I guess. But I think it was last winter, we had a really bad storm, and I got my pickup truck's 4x4, and I was still heading to the yard. I was going through drifts that was hitting the bumper, and another guy called me, another driver, and he said, because he knew where I was going, and again, I didn't have much weight. And he called me and he says, you might want to call in and not go anywhere because it's pretty bad out here. So thankfully that day I decided I'm not going anywhere. So
I'm glad you made it through. I appreciate you sharing your story with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and I'm glad I made it as well.
A total of 600 travelers were stranded for as long as 48 hours. 7 nearby communities set up shelters, and a lot of local residents even opened up their homes to some of these travelers. Sadly, there was one person who died. On the first night, 41-year-old Neeland Rumble, who worked as a security guard, was on his way to a security job at a solar farm that was just a few hundred yards or a few hundred meters away from where his car was stuck in a snowdrift. At the time, he was not carrying a cell phone, and he wanted to call his parents and then just walk the rest of the way to his job. He got out of his car and started walking toward a nearby farmhouse, but he never made it. His body was found in a snowdrift the next day. Police believe he became disoriented in the severe whiteout conditions, and he died of hypothermia. If you like hearing stories about severe weather, you might like episode 70 with my guest Aaron. He was in Thailand when the huge tsunami happened in 2004. Here's a short clip from that episode.
I look out and I see this wall of white water, really far away, but I see this wall of white water, and we've never had any surf in these beaches. It's always been absolutely calm. And I said to Joe, do you guys get surf here? I've never seen anything like this. Check this out. And his face immediately dropped, and he said, something's not right. This isn't right. He lived there. He was like a climbing guide and a local, and he knew instantly that something wasn't right because he'd never seen anything like this and knew that shouldn't be happening here.
If you haven't heard that episode, it's titled Aaron Survived a Tsunami. And we have a couple of voicemails. First, I heard from Jose, who listens to What Was That Like while he's working as a tattoo artist.
Hi, Scott. My name is Jose. I'm originally from Brazil, but I've been living in Sydney, Australia for 6 years now, and I'm a tattoo artist. One fun fact I want to share with you is that your show, your voice, is probably the background of 90% of the tattoos I've done. After I discovered your show, I couldn't really go back to music. I was just listening to the same things over and over again. And when I found What Was That Like, it just gave me the perfect amount of entertainment without taking my concentration off. The stories that your guests present and the way they tell it is just the perfect level of distraction for me to work and still zone out without getting bored. So thank you so much for all the effort that you put into, and keep up the good work.
If you want to check out Jose's work, which is pretty amazing by the way, you can see it on his Instagram, and his username there is Gordotaub. That's Gordotaub. I'll link that in the show notes. If I ever get another tattoo, I might just have to make a quick trip to Sydney for that. And we also heard from Sandra.
Hi, my name is Sandra. I'm calling from a small town in California. I just wanted to comment on episode 101 with I cannot remember the young man's name, sorry. He was being held by knife point. Anyhow, and my point is, he didn't hear the gentleman come in or the commotion because he had his earbuds in or his earpods or whatever the heck they're called. And it just reminded me kind of that I need to be more aware of my surroundings. I'm a custodian at a school district and I often work by myself. And it gets dark out and I always have my AirPods in. I'm always listening to podcasts all day long. And I never thought I may not hear somebody coming up behind me or, any of that kind of thing. So thank you for having that story aired, as now I'm going to definitely keep one of them out so that I can hear surroundings and what's going on or, all that stuff. So thank you. Your show is amazing. I love it. I'm completely addicted and I can't wait for the next episode.
Thank you, Sandra. And the episode Sandra was referring to was episode 101, titled Garrett Was Held Hostage at Knife Point. And yes, being aware of your surroundings is very important. If you have a comment about the podcast or a particular episode or anything really, just record a memo on your phone and email it to me. Or you can call the podcast voicemail line at 727-386-9468 and leave a message there anytime, day or night, because it's never answered by a human. I seriously would love to hear from you, because you know what? Out of all my listeners, you're my favorite. Okay, so now we're at this week's listener story, and it's from someone you've probably heard me talking about because I listen to his podcast all the time. This story came in from Jordan Harbinger. He's the host of the Jordan Harbinger Show, and he talks to interesting people all the time. So the story you're about to hear from him, he gets these kind of stories from his guests, many of whom you've probably heard of. You can find his show by doing a search on your podcast app for Jordan Harbinger or at his website, jordanharbinger.com. Jordan's story is about a scary incident he had in Mexico City. Stay safe, and I'll see you in 1 week. That's right, just 1 week from now, because I've got a special bonus episode coming out on Friday, November 4, 1 week from today. See you then.
In the year 2000, which sounds like the future but is really the past, I was a young kid who had no money but wanted to travel around all the time, of course, like many young kids. So I went to Israel, and there was an uprising, and my parents were freaking out every day. So I went backpacking in Egypt for a while, and they freaked out even more because I couldn't go back. So I left in the middle of a college semester, and I couldn't just rejoin my university, so I headed down to Mexico to take some Spanish classes, kill some time until the following semester. And of course, I had nowhere to stay, so I found a place through friends of friends of friends on the roof, literally on the roof of these old people's house in Mexico City. And this wasn't in a normal neighborhood. It was kind of like this. A lot of the houses were unfinished cinder block. There wasn't a whole lot of public transport around. There were these buses that would take you somewhere for $1, and occasionally, but very rarely, a taxi would drive by. And one day, about 8 p.m., 7 p.m., I was going to meet a friend of mine down in the center of Mexico City, and I decided, you know what? I'm dressed nice. I'm going to take a taxi. I don't want to take the bus and walk and be all dirty. So I flagged down a taxi. It took me a while, but I got kind of lucky, and one drove by, and I didn't have any cash. And so I told the driver, hey, I need to go to the ATM. I only have a credit card. And he said, no problem, no problem. Now, this is Mexico City. I wanted to go directly to the center right near the presidential palace. It's called the Zocalo. Every driver knows where this is. Well, the taxi driver is driving further and further away from this. And that was weird to me. Mexico City is shaped like a bowl. If you go up, you're going further away from the center. If you're going down, you're going towards the center. Essentially, the whole city is sinking. So it's real easy to navigate by sight when you're going to the center anyway. And I knew we were going the wrong way. So finally, I asked him and I said, where are we going? And I thought, maybe there's traffic, maybe there's an accident. But he said, I'm going to ask my friend for directions. Now, this was a major red flag because this is like a cabbie in Washington, D.C. saying he's going to ask for directions when you want to go to the White House, or a New York cabbie having to ask for directions to take you to Times Square. Just didn't add up, didn't make any sense. And this is before mobile phones. So I wasn't scrolling Instagram or social media and distracting myself. I was looking out the window and worrying if I was about to get kidnapped. Now, my brain's thinking, well, you've never been kidnapped before, so why would you get kidnapped now? And I realized that was a logical fallacy. And I started to think, what if I am getting kidnapped? What if this guy's taking me to the proverbial place where nobody can hear you scream? I don't really want to do that to myself. You know, I got a whole life ahead of me. What is going to happen? So I told him to just let me out. He said no. I told him to drive me back to where I was and I would pay him. And he said, hey, I thought you said you didn't have any cash on you. And I was like, damn, of course, I should have played that one closer to the vest. And that's when I realized I'm either going to get robbed. You know, people are going to get in the car and take me around, or I'm going to get chopped up into little pieces or something like that in a basement. I don't want to find out which one of these it is. And I tried to get out, but the door locks actually sunk below flush with the door handle, and I couldn't get the door open. And I thought, this is actually a kidnap mobile, intentionally or not. The doors won't open. I can't get the door open at all. I can't unlock it myself. So the driver kept going. I kept trying to figure out ways to finagle to get out. He kept sort of acting friendly, but a little agitated because he knew I was agitated. And I knew something was up, because if somebody wants to get out of your car that bad and you're not up to something, you let the creep out of your car. But he would not go for it. Finally, he stops in front of this cinder block house, and it's really looking bad. This is a really rough area. There's no street lighting. The roads are really awful. And I'm thinking, this is sort of a bad neighborhood, right? This is not a place where happy, productive people live and work and play. And I was sitting behind him, and he didn't really notice that. I slid from this behind the passenger seat to behind the driver's side. I put my arm between him and the door quietly, and I said, don't get out of the car. Keep driving. I don't want to get out here. Go back to a place that has better lighting. And he said, this is my friend's house. Relax. I'm just going to ask for directions. Now, remember, again, pre-mobile phones. He couldn't call anyone to ask for directions. He couldn't get directions online. He also couldn't warn anyone that he was coming in advance. So I figure he's going to run out, go to the house, get a couple of thugs. They're going to get in the car with me. And that's the best case scenario. The worst case is they drag me out of the car and nobody ever hears from me again. So I told him again in no uncertain terms to get out of here. You know, we are leaving. We are not getting out here. Instead, he made a fast one for the door. And again, remember, I had my arm between him and the door, and he didn't make it out of the car. I was 20 years old. I worked out twice a day, and I ate carne asada nonstop. He was 50-something years old or even older, and he sat in a cab all day, maybe eating the occasional burrito or rice bowl, and he was not in good shape. There was a physical altercation. He ended up losing that physical altercation. He got choked out, basically, by me from the back seat. Still couldn't get the car door open. Pushed him out of his driver's side door. Tried to drive. Guess what? Stick shift, 1968. Not only can you not drive that if you don't know the trick with the clutch and the shifter and all that stuff, it's an old car. And even if you can drive stick, you're freaking out. You're vibrating at about 1,000 RPM or whatever your wrists and hands are doing at that point with all that adrenaline. No way was I going to figure that out that moment. Took the keys and threw them. 20/20 hindsight, should have kept the keys, but nothing ever came of it. Threw them, ran until I couldn't run anymore, and I got to a main road, and a couple stopped and picked me up. Now, they didn't want to pick me up. I looked like a crazy person, but I was wearing Banana Republic chinos and a nice blue dress shirt that I had soaked through with sweat. I had fake blonde hair. I was 20, forgive me here. I had fake blonde hair. Finally, someone stopped and said, what's going on? And I said, I got kidnapped. And they said, what are you talking about? And I said, get me out of here. And they're like, I'm not letting you in the car, you sweaty gringo. So finally, I offered to ride in the trunk of a car, and they didn't make me do that. They let me sit in the back seat, and they offered to take me somewhere. I said, take me to the police, which is when I got a nice sort of tongue lashing about how the police are probably in on any kidnapping scheme that's going on in the area. And also, where's that cabbie? Is he still alive? If he's not, you could be in deeper trouble than you think. And I thought, these are all very valid points. So the guy wouldn't take me home. He didn't want to know where I lived. So he took me to a metro station. And that night, I packed up all my crap in the middle of the night and got the first bus real early. Spent most of the time at the bus station real early, moved to a different city, and never went back.